Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlicker, shills, death, search, peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I am a useful idiot, and let's talk about Donald Trump and the administration, current administration. And the fact is, Trump ran on a platform of non-interventionism, which is not isolationism. I know the media portrayed it as isolationism and just withdrawing from the international community, but it's more about non-intervention, which is not meddling in the internal affairs of other countries around the globe, which the United States has a long history of. And so after running on that platform, there seemed to be some hopes that the new administration would be less involved in these international conflicts and be less warmongering than all the previous administrations. But unfortunately, it's not turning out to be true for the most part. But there's still the jury's still out because there's a lot of tug of war going on apparently between the military and Trump right now, and Trump's taken the brunt of the problems like the strike in Yemen that everyone's talking about. The military is in charge of all that, so to put it on Trump is really not appropriate. But some of the reasons why, of course, we have the first day the administration's in office, we have the strikes in Yemen, in Iraq, and Syria, and then we have talk of a safe zone in Syria, and there's a flare up in Ukraine, and talk of continuing torture and keeping Gitmo open. And now this confrontation with Iran and talks of a military buildup, not to mention the appointment of people like General Flynn and General Mattis, and throwing around people like Steve Bolton and Elliot Abrams. All these people have connection with the Project for a New American Century, the neocon think tank paper that outlined a very aggressive preemptive war strategy around the globe by the United States. So now we have Trump in office, and let's look at all the different areas of the world where we have evidence that apparently the new Trump administration is going to be involved in these conflicts. So first of all, we have Iran, and there's missile tests that have happened, which are not really a violation as I understand it, and really don't amount to much, but they're being used to demonize Iran again, and there's a lot of saber rattling going on and new sanctions and a lot of tit for tat. And Iran claims that sanctions will keep out U.S. oil companies, so that's one reason why we know they're going to be very careful about these sanctions, because U.S. oil companies definitely want to get a piece of the Iran action. And they talk about the fact that it's very inflammatory right now in the alternative press about the fact that Iran announced it will cease using the dollar in financial reporting. So that's not exactly abandoning the dollar. So there was a lot of concern that a lot of countries that have decided to not use the dollar, particularly when it involves oil, have ended up getting bombed. And so there's been some fear there, but it's a lot less dramatic than that. They're just not going to use the dollar in financial reporting, so fairly benign. And but they're talking about Iran destabilizing the Middle East, and Iran is just another proxy actor. Doesn't really destabilize the Middle East, certainly as much as the United States and Western coalition. And Trump talked about Iran being, quote, on notice, unquote, in violation of these U.S. Terms for the nuclear treaty. And then the U.S. Treasury has announced sanctions on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization and technology sector, wanting to restrict any technology they think might go to Iran and help their war efforts or their nuclear weapons program that doesn't exist. So anyway, this flare up with Iran is probably just a little leverage for further negotiations. I don't know, but I don't like the direction it's taking. And he did say that he feels that Iran is taking over in Iraq after the U.S. spent $3 trillion there, which is a fairly legitimate concern because Iran and Iraq are certainly very close. And also the fact that internally Trump aides and insiders suggest that Trump is interested in resurrecting the shock and awe program, and he even uses that same terminology. So no surprise that he would have been impressed with that when the Bush administration unleashed it. And then we go to Afghanistan, and there's talk about sending more U.S. troops there. We've been there since 2001, of course, and there's somewhere between 9 and 13,000 U.S. combat troops and security forces, and then also plenty of mercenaries, I'm sure, are still there. So we probably have 20 or 30,000 when you factor that in. But now we have the military under the Trump administration talking about maybe sending more troops there because the situation certainly continues to deteriorate. So that war will continue to go on, and I would imagine will go on as long as Trump is in office or longer. And then we have Yemen, of course. That war has been going on for some 4 or 5 years now. The U.S. completely backs the Saudi slaughter going on there. 10,000 people killed so far, millions displaced, and hunger, lapsing into hunger. And claims that some of these top leaders were killed are dubious at best, although we do know an 8-year-old girl, another member of the al-Alawi family, was killed. And then the hypocrisy and scrutiny now that the Trump airstrikes are getting when 8 years of Obama airstrikes and drone strikes didn't receive much attention. And then we had General Flynn coming out and talking about the Houthi attack on a Saudi vessel, somehow involving the Iranians, and then claiming it was a U.S. vessel, and that's all bogus. That's been turned out to be a hoax, but once again could be used to dramatically increase U.S. military presence in Yemen, and there's been discussion of that. Unfortunately, we know that Saudi Arabia is going to continue their war there, and the U.S. continues to back it. And in fact, in the last days of the Obama administration, they unleashed some more airstrikes in Yemen. And then we look at Ukraine, and General Mattis now comes out and against kind of what the narrative that Trump's been giving, has declared that Russia is our #1 threat, and so I guess the demonization of Russia will continue to go on in this boogeyman, and then of course the showdown in Ukraine as that flares up again, and we have calls by crazy people like John McCain to start sending more weapons over there, but that's a situation. Once again, we need to stay out of it. I think the Poroshenko government in Kiev and Ukraine is emboldened by Trump being in office and unleashing a new offensive, and then that whole dilemma and controversy about Putin as some sort of killer, and then Trump admitting that there's certainly been plenty of killers in the United States, and that's just an accurate statement. Certainly, he's not very tactful in saying it, but that happens to be true. And then the situation with China associated with that ban, unfortunately, who advises Trump, said that going to war with China in the next 5 or 10 years is inevitable. And I don't buy that narrative, because I don't really buy this whole showdown between China and the United States. And even the situation in the South China Sea has been relatively quiet, and I think things will eventually be worked out aside from all the controversy. And Trump's in office now, and he knows that we have the capability to do thousands of drone strikes per year, and it looks like he's going to do that. He knows that we have U.S. special forces in 133 countries around the world at any given time now, and that we have military actions going on all over Africa. We have military operations internally going on all over the Middle East and Afghanistan, and that we have 1,000 bases around the globe, and that we have all these military capabilities. So far, it'll be interesting to see how ultimately Trump administration is going to use this military power. So far, it seems to indicate that we're going to be in for some more war, and in that sense, right now it doesn't look like it's going to be much different than 8 years of Bush and 8 years of Obama in that sense. But we'll see what ends up playing out. Like I say, I'm a little dismayed. I wanted to be a situation where there's going to be even more non-intervention. And then, of course, Syria. That's one area where it looks like the Trump administration is not going to get involved, although it'd be very complicated trying to set up free zones, basically no-fly zones for refugees internally within Syria, particularly because we have such an amalgamation there now with Turkish forces, Russian airstrikes, Syrian forces, Hezbollah proxy forces from all around the region, ISIS and Al Qaeda and everyone else. So how you would end up doing that pragmatically is pretty complicated. So far, that's one region where there looks to be non-intervention, but we'll have to watch this. It's certainly too early to judge. The Trump administration's only been in an office for a few weeks, and so anyway, we'll just look for more indicators, and I hope nothing drastic happens. But right now, the Trump administration is choosing war, and we'll just have to see what kind of war they choose. War itself, of course, is inevitable, no matter who's president right now, and at least all the other candidates certainly seem to be talking about even more war than we have now. So I'm useful idiot, don't you be one too.